Welcome to another 21 Hats Dashboard. I'm Lauren Feldman, and I'm here with Ami Kassar, who is founder and CEO of MultiFunding. Ami is an all-around expert on small business finance who has been a guest here many times. Welcome back, Ami. Last week, you may have seen the Wall Street Journal ran a story reporting that the Fed's half-a-point interest rate cut had jolted, that's the word they used, had jolted the small business owners in this country into reassessing their plans. The reporter found several owners who said that either because the cost of capital had come down or because their customers had more money in the pocket to spend, they were looking to invest more in their businesses. I wanted to back up on a point that you made. You were talking about how much of a difference a half-point cut would make in someone who's interested in borrowing money to invest in the business. I'm curious, it just seems to me that if a deal makes sense, if it makes economic sense, if there's an ROI on the investment, then that half point probably doesn't make that big a difference. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, that's really the point, Lauren. So if you came to us 2 weeks ago and wanted to get a $100,000 SBA loan over a 10-year amortization to grow your business, and then you came to us today it's about $30 cheaper a month to borrow $100,000, or it's $300 cheaper a month to borrow $1 million. So in the big picture of things, it's more of an emotional thing right now than a numbers thing. Now, maybe people will get carried away by the emotion and be happy and excited about it. That's so good. But from a dollars and cents perspective, it's not going to make all that much difference yet.
Do you have a sense of how much more the rates would have to fall for it to really make a difference?
Well, again, I've always been super hesitant, as you know, to call or predict what's going to happen in the economy.
I didn't mean to suggest that you predict how much or when, but just what would make a difference?
No, but I think rates 2 to 3 points will really, from a dollars and percents perspective, make a difference. And that's not going to happen overnight. But it is my sense that if what I see going on in the small business market is right, and there's this domino effect of a lot of COVID cash running out and the higher inflation, that to spur small businesses and their activity and stabilize many of them, if that is in fact a priority for the Feds, as I think it will be, rates are going to have to drop a lot fairly quickly, in my opinion.
Got it. All of this points out something that I think has confused a lot of people, which is, if you read the mainstream business press, the macro picture of how the economy has been doing has been pretty good. There are always things to worry about. There are always concerns. There are always possibilities. But by and large, it hasn't been bad. But when I talk to business owners, and I think this is true of you too, when you talk to business owners, you get a very different view. And I think that there seems to be a discrepancy between the macro economy and the small business economy. Do you think that's right?
I think it's totally right. But it also hits the smaller businesses first, right? So I think I wrote a column about this several months ago that I was starting to get a little anxious because I started to see some weirdness in the small business lending market and lenders pulling out and toughness or changes of credit criteria. And that started to be reminiscent to me of like 2008.
That's not a good thing.
Yeah. And if you look at the patterns now, it's usually the smaller businesses who've got less strength start to get hit first. And it's not all businesses, and there are plenty of businesses out there that are still doing fine. But there are plenty of businesses out there today that are struggling. And the difference here between 2008 and now is 2008 was driven by other issues. But here you have a lot of small businesses that got bolstered with COVID cash in the last couple of years. And now, not for all of them, but for many of them, that COVID cash is gone, and that it's not getting replaced. And that certainly, I'm not sure anyone knows how to deal with that. I think we are going to see a decent amount of bankruptcy in the small business space and entrepreneur space over the next year or two.
I think what you suggested in that column you're referring to is that there are a lot of businesses out there that got used to having what you refer to as the COVID cash, whether it's a loan that they got, an EIDL or a PPP loan, or whether it was just because their customers were supported by COVID cash and had money to spend, and that money was drying up. And the situation, I guess, if that money had been used to build the business or improve the business, it would be one thing. If the money has just been used for general operating purposes and then stops coming in, that's the problem you're referring to?
Yeah. So, but again, I've always argued, and this is a lot of my beef with a lot of changes that this SBA administration has made in a lot of the underwriting criteria, trying to make it much simpler and faster for people to get an SBA loan without going through a proper cash flow analysis, is that if you give a small business owner or an entrepreneur more money than they can afford to pay back or at once, there's a really good chance they're going to screw it up. So with the COVID EIDL money specifically, when we were giving large tranches out of it during the end of the pandemic to many businesses without proof of economic injury, many people suddenly had more cash in their bank account than they would have ever dreamed about. And they didn't have to start making interest payments for 2 or 3 years. And some of them spend it fraudulently, and I have no empathy for them. But many of them just went along about it, trying to invest and grow in their business, but certainly maybe in a bit of a fat and lazy way, because suddenly they had all this cash that they had never dreamed about. So, as an example, I spoke to an entrepreneur just earlier this week who got a $2 million EIDL. And now the payments are due, and he's almost out of cash. And when I asked him how much his loss was last year, it was about $650,000. And when I asked him how much money he thinks he's going to need to get to break even in his business, his answer was he's not sure, somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million. And that's a very scary place to be in, because now he has a $2 million IOU to the U.S. government. He would have, in ordinary times, and I don't know if his business was hurt or not by COVID, never in a million years in a regular loan being able to borrow $2 million. But that money gave him a false sense of security that sadly will be very, very hard for him to work his way out of.
What would have been the right thing for him to do with that money?
Well, the right thing, first of all, would have been for the government not to give him that much.
Okay.
That's a side story. But I always say, if you borrow money and you're going to invest it in your business, do it with a carefully calibrated plan and significant financial metrics as to what it is you're trying to accomplish. And if you, and check yourself against it, and don't spend it all at once. Okay. So I'm not sure exactly what this guy did and with his money and how he used it, and maybe his plan didn't go to plan, and maybe he had a plan, it just didn't work. But there are so many stories like that. Now, it does seem in this guy's case, he put it into his business.
It wasn't fraudulent, you're saying?
It wasn't fraudulent. And there are plenty of fraudulent cases, but really I mean, there's a bigger question of was his business even hurt by COVID, which I don't know the details of. So it seems like it might have been a violation of the principle of the EIDL program, but there is so much of that.
Is what you're saying here, Ami, that the big difference between the COVID cash loans, the EIDL loans, and a more typical situation is there just has never been an opportunity to get money like that without a rigorous plan? That in a normal situation, you have to go to a bank and tell them what you're going to do with the money, and you've got to back it up and be prepared for a lot of tough questions. Whereas in this case, there were no tough questions.
100%. So I'm going to make a guess that if that guy had come to me for a conventional SBA loan at that time, he might have been lucky to get a couple $100,000 on a 10-year note. And the lender that would have all been based on his ability to pay back the loan. And he would have had to start making his payments right away. And he would have had to present a business plan as to how he was going to pay back the loan. And that would be responsible and prudent lending. And maybe his plan would or wouldn't have worked, but he would have had $350,000, which was clear that he could afford to pay back. He probably got here 6 times that much money, now on a less aggressive payback schedule. But suddenly he felt quite rich and happy, especially because he didn't have to make payments for 2.5 years.
That's really interesting. I hadn't really thought about it that way previously. It's kind of like we've run an experiment here. Where, what happens if you inject a bunch of businesses with more money than they need?
Yeah, and I don't think the story's going to end well for anybody, for most people.
Well, let's talk about something a little bit more positive, which is the column you've written that we're going to publish at 21hats.com later this week. And that's your acknowledgement that times have been turbulent and tough and difficult for a lot of businesses, but that even in really difficult times, there can be opportunities. Tell us about that.
I mean, that's totally right. So it's important. And I think I talk about in the column about running businesses like running a football team, and any good football team really only works without a good offense. Well, only works with a good offense and defense. And it's super important to realize and recognize that all these turbulent economic times we're in also create opportunities for your company. You might be able to buy a company really cheaply, or a competitor could go bankrupt, or you might be able to pick up really good talent that you would never been able to get before, or there might be new opportunities for new service lines or products in your market. Maybe you at different price points or different things based on different consumer habits or patterns. So you kind of have to look at the world through both lenses. You certainly have to play defense and worry about costs and expenses and overhead and all that. It's one thing. But you also have to look out there and say, what are the opportunities here?
Have you seen any opportunities for multi-funding?
Oh, I totally have. I think one is economy related and one is not economy related. But we managed to add an incredibly talented SBA lender to our team, whom I don't think we could have got picked up in a different economy. And he's starting next week. And I think he will be a great addition to us. And I'm not sure we would have got him a year or two ago in a different market. And so that's on one side. Now, we're super excited. We're going to be launching in a month with a new banking partner, Lauren, and I'll be excited to share the details as it comes out. But as you know, I've been trying to launch a suite of products, banking services for entrepreneurs for 2.5 years. And I'm in a state of delight and disbelief that I finally found a partner that we're going to do that with in 11 states, which is where they are presently active. And we will launch that at the end of October at the eccentric conference in Fort Worth, and I'm really excited about that as well. Now, that opportunity is not related to the economy per se, but it's just fortuitous that I found it during a pretty tough time in our business the last couple of months.
That sounds great. I hope you will share the details in your 21 Hats column.
It'll be coming up, I promise.
All right. Ami Kassar is founder and CEO of MultiFunding, which helps businesses with their financing needs. Thanks for taking the time, Ami.
Lauren, it's my pleasure, my friend, always, and have a good one.
Have a great week, everybody.